Hello, psyc250 students. Ready for chapter 12, our last chapter before we take exam 3. I'm still excited about the results for exam 2. Amazing. Hope you got the picture I sent to you with mask. I'm hoping to take, for the very first time ever, a picture with the entire costume. May you be the first class to experience it. Let's talk about this chapter here, chapter 12, Neurocognitive Disorders. Got a couple case studies to talk about, one in particular, probably for the first clip. How many of you have had somebody in your family start to lose their memory? Maybe a grandparent, great aunt, great uncle, maybe even a parent. It's tragic because what happens is we know who the person is. We have all kinds of memories of them, and they had memories of us at one point in their lives. But now it's as if they're slipping away through our fingers, right? Because let's be honest, what is a person with no memory? Our identity is tied to all our memories, who we are, how we interact with other people, etc. Here, an artist looks at the whole issue of forgetfulness with a speaker who's going to talk about the main tips of forgetfulness, and of course cannot remember one of them, which is typical. How many of you have had the experience where you've walked into a room and you literally forgot after you've walked into the room why you're there? I know I came in here for a reason, right? Horrible thing. So I'd like to test your ability to see if you have any memory issues. And I want you to answer the following questions for me, if you'd be so kind. I'm going to ask you to repeat 3 words in a minute or two. I will ask you to recall those words on your own. Repeat the following 3 words: apple, table, and penny. Can you repeat those? Okay, good. Can you repeat them again, please? All right. Now, I want you to recite the months of the year in reverse order, starting from December and go backwards to January. Begin. December, November. I know it's not that easy to go backwards that way. We're not used to that. Now I want you to answer the following questions. What state are you currently in? What country are you currently in? What city are you currently in? Hopefully you're getting some of these right. What location are you currently in? Which floor are you currently on? Now, can you repeat those 3 words I mentioned at the beginning of this questionnaire? What are they? Hopefully you said apple, table, and penny. If you didn't, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a form of dementia. This is just a common assessment, just to assess on a very preliminary basis if somebody is struggling with their memory, because when we suspect that people are suffering from some form of dementia, and keep in mind dementia is like a broad umbrella, right? A broad umbrella that covers all kinds of illnesses such as Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. But with dementia, we have a loss of memory. And a lot of times it starts with that tip of the tongue type of phenomena, like you know the name of the group, but you just can't think of the song or the name of the movie, or it's just right there. And then it starts to broaden more and more and more, where you can't remember what month it is, what day it is. Now, I'll be honest, I have to ask people these days because one day seems to be rolling into the next. What day is this? But Under stress, of course, our memory suffers. And when you have too many things on your plate, our memory suffers. But we start seeing a pattern of loss of common everyday phenomena. Now, we can check out through simple tests, but getting other people's opinions, their observations, is very important in the assessment of a possible neurocognitive disorder. More information is very, very important. Now, some of our testing is rather limited because it doesn't always show neurological damage, but certainly things like MRIs or PET scans or CT scans or EEGs could be relevant depending on the condition. Although language is an issue that we see suffer almost immediately, we also have to consider other things like learning ability, where people cannot learn new tasks because guess what? As you know, new tasks are based on memory. Now, fortunately, my memory is still intact, that in between when I record these videos, I have to remember a multiple step process that was taught to me approximately a month ago by one of my esteemed colleagues. And luckily, I worked my way through it and I figured out how to do it all over again. If I suffer from neurocognitive decline, I wouldn't be able to do that. I would just merely be staring at this and say, I don't even know what step to begin. You could show me the first step, and sometimes some of it might come back, and sometimes it doesn't. Theory says that the memory is still there. It's just the pathways to get to it is blocked. So we see a definition of dementia. And again, remembering that dementia can be caused by many different things, including psychological trauma, including blows to the head, including obviously some disturbances within our brain. I'd like to read a poem that was written by a woman who suffered from dementia. And this is her poem, the experience of her life as written about her. It's called Death Before Dying. It isn't fair that a woman who spoke 4 languages and knew every word in Webster's dictionary should be brought to this death before dying. She still remembers words, but strings them all together wrong. A night wandering, she babbles in 4 languages. I can remember everything, she cries. And then she cries. Because somewhere she knows that everything does not remember her. Again, death before dying. Just a few words, but I think it sums up a person's experience. Now to my case study. Case study is called Sarah. A little background information about Sarah. Sarah was a child of migrants, and she happened to be born while her family was traveling in the migrant stream. As a young girl, she came from a big family and eventually met a fella where they got married and had several children. This was some years ago, so her role at that particular time was to take care of the family, which any mom will tell you, if that's what they do, is like working 2 full-time jobs, right? Eventually, her marriage dissolved, and she was left to raising her kids by herself, and she did a fantastic job by all accounts. Fast forward to her 70s. It started off with small evidence of dementia by simply forgetting people's names around her. Now, come on. If you have a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sometimes my own mother would get so mad that she would rattle off all our kids' names before she got to our name. And then she'd get mad that we weren't answering to other people's names. If you've had that experience, you know what I'm talking about. That's just being flustered. But she would forget people's names. And then later she'd remember them and kind of laugh it off as a joke. Now, Sarah lived with one of her daughters, and she had a downstairs apartment while they lived in an upstairs apartment. She had a full living arrangement, which meant she had her own bedroom, living room, and kitchen. And that's when the fire occurred. Sarah left something on the stove and it caused a small fire. Luckily, there's just a lot of smoke, ruined pan, not that much damage. But her daughter and her daughter's family was concerned. Now, how many of us have left something on the stove, right? As a matter of fact, around my house, I always tease them and say, I'm going to open up a restaurant called The Burnt Tortilla because I'm always leaving the tortilla too long when I'm heating it up and it burns. But then the second fire occurred, and this fire was more significant. Forgetting something on the stove, the fire caught on to the curtains, fire truck came, and luckily nobody was hurt. There was a little bit of damage, lots of smoke. Sarah laughed it off and joked about how cute the firefighters were. But at this point, her daughter was really concerned. Second of a couple fires, plus a lot of other things that they started noticing, they noticed that Sarah would stare out the window at nothing in particular for long periods of time. And this was very unusual for this very vibrant woman. It started to deteriorate even more, and the family had to get together and make a very hard decision. Place Sarah in a facility that could care for her 24/7. Now, we've been all raised to take care of our elders. Our elders have taken care of us, and that's our responsibility. But many families are faced with this, especially with many people working, going to school, and really wanting to be sure that care was there. It was approximately 5 years later, after she deteriorated substantially as far as her memory and became nonverbal whatsoever, that Sarah died. Now, this is a sad story, but it's a very common story. And people are wondering, well, isn't that what normally happens when people get older? Don't they just start losing their memory? Well, not necessarily. Many of us have met individuals who are quite elderly who are sharp as a tack. We've investigated this issue very carefully to find out why is it that some of us start to show signs of decline and dementia early onset, and some of us don't show any signs whatsoever? And why is it that we have more cases of things like Alzheimer's, which is what ultimately Sarah was diagnosed with? Well, we could say, well, it's the aluminum pots and pans that we initially thought back in the 80s, but it's really quite complex. It's tied to genetics, it's tied to other ailments, it's tied to our environment. That's why it's so important to have a good genetic history so we have a good sense of what kind of genes are we carrying. Are we carrying things for diabetes? Are we carrying things for hypertension? Do we have dementia in our families? And that's why it's good to ask questions, take a good family history, any kind of physical or mental health issues. So we kind of know, all right, this is our makeup. How do we take care of ourselves in the very best possible way? Now, there's some things that are out of our control, but with good living, exercise, good eating, we can reduce the possibility of some of these issues. Let's continue again with Chapter 12 for the next video. Thank you for your attention.